Most of us would be all too familiar with this scene from the excellent 1988 film Rainman.
All airlines have crashed at one time or another.
Qantas.
Qantas?
Qantas never crashed.
Qantas?
Never crashed.
But did Qantas ever really crash? That's what we're going to dive deeper into in today's video. First, just a brief background for those that may not know. Qantas is actually an acronym that's been in use since the very beginning of the company's history. It's a shortened version of the original name, Queensland and Northern Territory Aerial Services Limited. Registered on November 16, 1920, just a few years after World War I ended, in Winton, Queensland, Australia. A funny memory I have is my grade 6 teacher, shout out to Miss Crook, that was from England. She told us in class that Qantas was misspelled, as a U should always follow a Q. Clearly she thought it was just a name made up and not from the letters it stands for. The airline was the brainchild of three key figures. Hudson Fysh, a former World War I observer and pilot. He became the driving force of the company and served as its long-time managing director and chairman. Paul McGuinness, Fysh's fellow World War I pilot. He was instrumental in the initial survey of the air route across northern Australia that led to the airline's formation. Fergus McMaster, a wealthy Queensland grazier who provided the crucial financial backing and business leadership after a chance meeting with McGuinness, who had helped McMaster with a broken-down car in the Cloncurry River. And a secret fourth founder, Arthur Baird, who's often considered the engine of the early years. He was the flight sergeant who served with Fysh and McGuinness in the Australian Flying Corps and became the airline's first chief engineer. Without his mechanical genius, those early biplanes likely wouldn't have survived the harsh outback conditions. Now, this video is by no means about the complete history of Qantas, the company, nor a catalogue of every aircraft type that Qantas has ever had in service. However, we will look at this particular Boeing 707, formerly owned by John Travolta, more closely in my next video. So back to the topic. In the very early decades, like the 1920s and 30s, Qantas did have a few crashes back in the propeller and flying boat days. There were some incidents and a few fatalities, because aviation back then was just a riskier business in general. So here's the chronological list of Qantas fatal incidents and major crashes during those decades. Note, prior to 1929, the registration numbers of the aircraft in Australia all started with the letter G, or Golf in the phonetic alphabet, just as they do in the UK. After 1929, all prefixes changed to VH, Victor Hotel, as remains the case today. March 24th, 1927, at Tambo, not Tambourine, Queensland. The aircraft was an Airco DH86, registered number Golf Alpha Uniform Echo Delta. The aircraft stalled at low altitude whilst on approach to land. There were 3 fatalities, the pilot, Alan Davidson, and 2 passengers. This was the first fatal accident in Qantas's history. September 4th, 1928, Adelaide Hills, South Australia. The aircraft was a de Havilland DH86 registered Golf Alpha Uniform Hotel India. While attempting to cross the Adelaide Hills in heavy cloud, the pilot lost control. The aircraft crashed and caught fire. There was 1 fatality, a flight engineer. The pilot survived. October 3rd, 1934, near Winton, Queensland. The aircraft was a de Havilland DH50A, registration number VH Uniform Hotel Echo. The aircraft crashed after an in-flight loss of control, likely due to a stall in dusty, low visibility conditions. All 3 souls on board died. November 15th, 1934, near Longreach, Queensland. The aircraft was a de Havilland DH86, registration number VH Uniform Sierra Golf. This occurred during the delivery flight from England to Brisbane. The DH86 was known for design deficiencies in the tail unit. The aircraft crashed after losing control, killing all 4 on board. Despite this tragedy, Qantas officially went international on April 17, 1935, using 4-engine DH86 land planes to bridge the gap between Brisbane and Singapore. It was primarily a mail run for Imperial Airways, and that first historic flight carried only 2 paying passengers, Lady Mountbatten and a major in the Coldstream Guards. The breaking point. Whilst not a Qantas aircraft, the DH86's reputation was about to shatter completely. On October 2nd, 1935, another fatal crash occurred, this time involving VH Uniform Romeo Tango, operated by Hollyman's Airways during an approach to Whitemark Airport on Flinders Island, Tasmania. It was later determined that the aircraft entered into an uncontrollable spin and plunged into the sea, just 3 kilometres offshore, killing all 5 on board. The British-built de Havilland DH86 Express had a notorious safety record, the most troubled commercial aircraft of its era. Out of only 62 aircraft built, roughly 1/3 of the entire fleet was lost to accidents. Qantas lost 2 of their fleet of 5 such aircraft. Faced with multiple fatal accidents and obvious design flaws, the Australian government took the extraordinary step of suspending the certificate of airworthiness for the entire DH86 type. The suspension was lifted after mere weeks, but only after the Civil Aviation Branch mandated immediate structural modifications. But by 1938, these cramped pioneers were phased out for a massive leap in luxury. The iconic short S-23 Empire flying boats. Complete with silver service dining and a promenade deck.
Giant British Empire flying boats will soon strengthen the link between Australia and the homeland. Seamanship must be combined with airmanship in the control of these splendid craft. And so at Brisbane, the Qantas staff of Australian flyers who will man them is specially trained for the dual job.
This shifted Australia's international hub from Brisbane's Archerfield to Sydney's Rose Bay, creating our first true international airport. These hotels in the sky turned a gruelling 9-day journey to Southampton, England, into a world-class experience, with over 30 stops through hubs like Darwin and Surabaya. It was the absolute pinnacle of pre-war glamour. However, the era was short-lived. With the outbreak of World War II, the fleet was pressed into military service.
The service was interrupted by World War II when more than half the Qantas fleet was commissioned for war service by the Australian government,
where several of these majestic aircraft were tragically lost. While Qantas maintained an incredible safety record for civilian passengers during the late 30s, the onset of World War II in the Pacific led to several losses, many due to enemy action. January 30th, 1942, Timor Sea. The aircraft was a short S-23 Empire flying boat named Courier. It was shot down by Japanese fighter aircraft near Kupang while on a flight from Surabaya. 13 out of the 18 people on board died. February 20th, 1942, in Brisbane, Queensland. The aircraft being a de Havilland DH86, registration number VH Uniform Sierra Echo, crashed shortly after takeoff from Archerfield, Brisbane, in stormy weather. Evidence suggested the aircraft may have broken up in flight. Sadly, all 9 on board died. Whilst I am trying to truncate this video to the basic historical listing of Qantas crashes, I do recommend you take a look at the deep dive video that T-Rox made a few years back with Gel Builder, where they locate the site of this 1942 crash and some very questionable actions taken by Qantas at the time. I have a link to his video in the description. So back to the topic. February 1942, the aircraft formerly named Coogee, VH Alpha Bravo Charlie, suffered a fatal impact during a RAF test flight in Townsville. 6 were killed. February 28th, 1942, Indian Ocean. The aircraft was a short S-23 Empire flying boat named Circe. It disappeared while flying between Java and Broome. It was later confirmed to have been shot down by Japanese aircraft. All 20 people on board died. March 1942. Yet another flying boat, Corinthian, hit submerged debris during a night landing in Darwin. 2 were killed. April 22nd, 1943, Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea. Again a short S-23 Empire flying boat called Camilla. During an emergency landing in the Gulf of Papua in poor weather, the aircraft stalled during the flare and broke up on impact. 13 out of 31 on board died. November 26, 1943, Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea. The aircraft was a Lockheed C-56B Lodestar. It struck a hill shortly after takeoff, killing all 15 on board. January 1944. The formerly named Clifton was forced to land on open ocean after an engine failure, with fortunately no fatalities. October 9th, 1944. A Qantas de Havilland DH86 Express, registration VH Uniform Sierra Charlie, crash-landed during approach less than 10 kilometres from Darwin Airport and ended up in flames. There were no casualties, but the aircraft was partially destroyed. October 11th, 1944, Rose Bay, Sydney. Once again the aircraft was a short S-23 Empire flying boat named Coolangatta. On final approach with one engine shut down, the aircraft stalled just above the water. The hull ruptured upon impact with the surface, killing 2 people. Side note, I visited the waterfront of Darwin's Doctor's Gully about 15 years ago and saw the remnants of the old slipway rails. Almost completely rusted away now. These tracks were once the lifeline for the water landing fleet, the only way to haul these massive flying boats out of the harbour for essential maintenance they required to stay airworthy. Beginning as a service point for Qantas's luxury flying boat fleet in 1938, they quickly became a frontline military necessity. These tracks weren't just for Qantas. They serviced a variety of aircraft, from the elegant Empire boats and RAF Black Cat Catalinas to Dutch Dorniers escaping the fall of Singapore. Becoming obsolete in 1945, they were a silent, salt-crusted reminder of the thin line between pioneer travel and total war. On June 24, 1945, tragedy struck again in Geraldton, Western Australia. The aircraft was yet again a de Havilland DH86 Express, VH Uniform Sierra Foxtrot, an ex-Qantas veteran newly overhauled for McRobertson Miller Airlines. On its inaugural service, the takeoff failed to develop into a climb. After a desperate low-level circuit, the plane clipped its wing and the aircraft cartwheeled and hit the ground nose first, breaking the fuselage apart, spilling out most of the 11 occupants. Captain Branch and one passenger were killed. The other 9 occupants seriously injured. The official investigation blamed the pilot, citing an indifferent landing. However, the panel was heavily criticised for ignoring the DH86's dark history. Their report admitted the type was prone to uncontrollable swings, listing 9 similar accidents. Yet they dismissed the aircraft's erratic behaviour before touchdown as irrelevant. The early era of Qantas fatalities concluded on July 16, 1951, following the crash of a DHA-3 drover in the Huon Gulf, just off the coast of Lae, Papua New Guinea. The aircraft, call sign VH Echo Bravo Quebec, was on approach to Lae from Bulolo in heavy rain when a propeller blade failed, causing the pilot to lose control. This remains the airline's last fatal passenger accident, as they have famously maintained a perfect safety record throughout the entire jet age. However, on the 24th of August 1960, there was a further crash of a propeller aircraft when a Qantas Lockheed L1049G Super Constellation, registration number VH Echo Alpha Charlie, was destroyed on takeoff at Mauritius International Airport. Engine number 3 lost power just before reaching takeoff speed of 115 knots. The captain throttled down, braked hard, and engaged reverse thrust. However, the aircraft didn't slow down enough to avoid overrunning the runway and bounced over a low embankment, crashed into a gully, and caught fire. None of the 50 occupants were killed, but the 5-year-old aircraft was destroyed. Whilst, like most airlines, there have been some incidences where, out of either necessity or prudence, aircraft have made unscheduled landings, thankfully there have been no lives lost in the modern jet era. All modern airliners are built with multiple layers of redundancy. For critical flight systems, there are often triple parallel backups, meaning even if one part fails or a warning light comes on, there are independent systems ready to take over. Even in the rare event of an engine failure, these aircraft are designed to fly safely for hours on the remaining engine to reach a suitable runway. In fact, every long-haul route is meticulously planned under strict international standards, known as ETOPS, ensuring that the next closest place to land is within their reach, no matter where the plane is in the sky. While the legend says Qantas has never crashed, the reality is even more impressive. Not a single fatality since 1951, and a perfect safety record throughout the entire jet age. To maintain that standard today, the game has changed. While Brisbane currently remains the beating heart of Qantas heavy maintenance in Australia, the days of every bolt being tightened on shore are sadly gone. Today, the fleet is supported by a global network. From specialised hangars right here in Brisbane, where I'm recording this, and Sydney, to massive high-tech hubs in Los Angeles and beyond. The Boeing Dreamliners and even the flagship Airbus A380s that were just recently returned to service visit these global specialist hubs to ensure that they meet the world's highest safety standards, proving that while the airline started in the outback, its safety net now spans the entire globe. Since those 4 pioneers started the company in Winton back in 1920, Qantas has covered a staggering 13 billion, with a B, kilometres, enough to fly to Mars and back 50 times over. Today, the entire fleet still covers the circumference of the Earth 20 times every single day. And yet, through all these billions of miles and over a century of flight, that legendary safety record remains the gold standard of the aviation world. So now you know the truth about Qantas's crash history. And if you're wondering why I'm wearing this Qantas 90th anniversary hat, stay tuned for my next video and I'll answer that question. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and also share it around. And also check your subscribe button, because YouTube has a nasty habit of unsubscribing people. Qantas, I take my hat off to you. Cheers.